Hello, and welcome to the Eye of Horus Productions new podcast, Some Would Say Coffee. Without it, one wonders, could life exist? The aroma in the air, the first sip of the day. I know when I don't get it, I stay in a coma, dazed and confused, wondering why I even open my eyes. Just imagine gazing at all those dazed people in every country in the world stumbling out of bed in the morning. They follow the wall, stumbling all the way to the coffee maker. When the coffee is brewing, they stare in a gaze at the table. The mind is a total blank until that sweet smell oozes out to turn the mind on just enough to think, what is today? Then they look at the clock on the wall, and somehow a cup was poured and you're drinking it as 6 a.m. turns to 6:30 in a blink. The caffeine takes effect and you realize you're late. You turn into Superman, shooting through the house like a poltergeist, unleashed into the world again. You start driving to work. Then you realize, hey, it's Friday. No one knows exactly how or when coffee was discovered, though there are many legends about its origin. Coffee grown worldwide can trace its heritage back centuries to an ancient coffee forest on the Ethiopian plateau. There, legend says, the goat herder, Kali, first discovered the potential of these beloved beans. The story goes that Kali discovered coffee after he noticed after eating the berries from certain tree, his goats became so energetic that they didn't want to sleep at night. Kali reported his findings to the abbot of the local monastery, who made a drink with the berries and found that it kept him alert throughout the long hours of the evening prayer. The abbot shared his discovery with the other monks at the monastery, and knowledge of the energizing berries began to spread. word moved east and coffee reached the Arabian Peninsula, it began a journey which would bring these beans across the globe. The Arabian Peninsula, coffee civilization and trade began on the Arabian Peninsula. By the 15th century, coffee was being grown in Yemen district of Arabia, and by the 16th century it was known in Persia, Egypt, Syria, and Turkey. Coffee was not only enjoyed in homes, but also by the many public houses which began to appear in the cities across the Near East. The popularity of the coffee houses was unequaled, and people came for all kinds of social activities. Not only did the patrons drink coffee and engage in conversation, but they also listened to music, watched performers, played chess, kept current on news. Coffee houses quickly became such an important center for the exchange of information that they were often referred to as social schools of the wise, with thousands of pilgrims visiting the holy city of Mecca each year from all over the world. Knowledge of this wine of Araby began to spread. Coffee comes to Europe. European travelers to the Near East brought back stories of an unusual dark black beverage. By the 17th century, coffee had made its way to Europe and was becoming popular across the continent. Some people reacted to this new beverage with suspicion or fear, calling it the bitter invention of Satan. The local clergy condemned coffee when it came to Venice in 1615. The controversy was so great that the Pope Clement VIII was asked to intervene. He decided to taste the beverage for himself before making a decision, and found the drink so satisfying that he gave it papal approval. Despite such controversy, coffee houses were quickly becoming centers of social activity and communication in major cities in England, Australia, France, Germany, and Holland. In England, penny universities sprang up, so called because the price of a penny could purchase a cup of coffee and engage in stimulating conversation. Coffee began to replace the common breakfast drink beverages of the time, beer and wine. Those who drank coffee instead of alcohol began the day alert and energized, and not surprisingly, the quality of their work was greatly improved. We like to think of this a precursor to the modern office coffee service. By the mid-17th century, there were over 300 coffee houses in London, many of which attracted like-minded patrons, including merchants, shippers, brokers, and artists. Many businesses grew out of these specialized coffee houses. Lloyd of London's, for example, came into existence at the Edward Lloyd Coffee House. Then to the New World. In the mid-1600s, coffee was brought to New Amsterdam, later called New York by the British, through coffee houses rapidly began to appear. Tea continued to be the favorite drink in the New World until 1773, when colonists revolted against a heavy tax on tea imposed by King George III.
This is it. You have got the right place. Let everyone know that the regulars marched for Lexington and Concord.
The British are coming! Let's get started! Long live the king! Kill the bloody man!
The revolt, known as the Boston Tea Party, would forever change American drinking preference to coffee. So said Thomas Jefferson, coffee, the favorite drink of the civilized world. Plantations around the world, as the demand of the beverage continued to spread, there was fierce competition to cultivate coffee outside of Arabia. The Dutch finally got seedlings in later half of the 17th century. Their first attempts to plant them in India failed. But they were successful with their efforts in Batavia, on the island of Java, in what is now Indonesia. The plants thrived, and soon the Dutch had a productive, growing trade in coffee. They then expanded the cultivation of the coffee trees to the islands of Sumatra and Celebes, coming to the Americas in 1714. The mayor of Amsterdam presented a gift of a young coffee plant to King Louis XIV of France. The king ordered it to be planted in the Royal Botanical Garden in Paris. In 1723, a young naval officer, Gabriel de Clicquot, obtained a seedling from the king's plant, despite a challenging voyage, complete with horrendous weather, a saboteur who tried to destroy the seedling, and a pirate attack. He managed to transport it safely to Martinique. Once planted, the seedling not only thrived, but it's credited with the spread of over 18 million coffee trees in the island of Martinique. In the next 50 years, even more incredible is that this seedling was the parent of all coffee trees throughout the Caribbean, South and Central America. The famed Brazilian coffee owes its existence to Francisco de Melo Palita, who was sent by the emperor to French Guiana to get coffee seedlings. The French were not willing to share, but the French governor's wife, captivated by his good looks, gave him a large bouquet of flowers before he buried inside were enough coffee seeds to begin what is today a billion-dollar industry. Missionaries and travelers, traders and colonists continued to carry coffee seeds to the new lands, and coffee trees were planted worldwide. Plantations were established in a magnificent tropical forest and a rugged mountain highlands. Some crops flourished while others were short-lived. New nations were established on coffee economies. Fortunes were made and lost. By the end of the 18th century, coffee had become one of the world's most profitable export crops. After crude oil, coffee is the most sought commodity in the world. Thanks for listening to another podcast on The Robert Stogner Show. I hope you enjoyed the show. See you again soon.